Hey folks, welcome to another Triple T Thursday. For those just joining us, that's Tools, Tips, and Talk, where we'll discuss info for the knife maker. I've had so many people ask me about my sharpening system and how I sharpen knives. So I figured I would build the sharpening attachment for you guys in this episode, show you how to build it. And for those that don't want to build it themselves, you can just buy them from my website. So I'll take you through what I use to sharpen, how I sharpen it, and how you can build your own. Let's take a look. So before I show you the new sharpening system, I figured I'd show you what I started with, which is this Wicked Edge Go. And this is the smaller version of the Wicked Edge. It does great bevels. I think you'll get a knife perfectly sharp with a Wicked Edge, but there's three issues. First one is that it just takes forever. Any of these systems, they just take a really long time to sharpen a knife. There's a lot of setup, and especially if your knife doesn't have a secondary bevel at all, you're going from nothing, it takes a really long time. Second is that for knives that are longer than, especially on the Wicked Edge Go, that are longer than 3 or 4 inches, you'll get these start and stops because you'll go to here and then you'll bottom out, so then you have to do it again, or you end up doing this, which just gives you really weird lines. And I want, because I sell knives, I want my sharpened edge to look pristine. And the third problem is price. You're easily into the 500 plus to get the stones you need for a Wicked Edge. If you get the Wicked Edge Pro, you're up to $1,500. So they are really pricey. So let's show you another option. So here's the attachment that I use exclusively for sharpening all of my knives now. This is something that I built. It goes onto a tool arm that slides into the receiver, the tool receiver. It has 2 points of adjustment, so you can adjust both these pivot points if you need some extra length. And of course, it's in the tool hole post, so it'll slide in and out. We're going to be sharpening with one of these, so your knife just gets attached into one of these, hooked onto the back of that, and we're going to be sharpening right before the wheel. Okay, just in that tiny slack area right before the wheel. The reason I like to sharpen up here is because I'm staring at the bevel. I'm staring at the edge when I'm sharpening. So I can see, as soon as I pass it along the edge, I can see when the burr forms. I'm staring right at it. It's perfectly within your eyesight. I think it's the best place to sharpen. And since this is hooked on the back, there's no issue with it flying out of your hand. The belt's going to be going very slow anyway. And then, of course, we can flip it over and do the other side. So we'll show you how to make this, how to get sharpening really quick, and sharpen a knife like this in 5 minutes. So here's what we're going to need to do this build. So let's talk about the pieces first. First, the steel. So there's these two risers. That's what's going to hold the bars. So this is 3/4 by 1.5 inch flat bar. So pretty hefty stuff, but we want this to be rigid. We don't want this to move when you press on it or anything like that. So we definitely want rigidity. So this is a 7-inch piece, okay? And this one is a 13-inch piece. Again, it's 3/4 by 1.5. Then the tool arm, we only need a 12-inch tool arm, and I'm using a 1.5-inch steel square tube. The reason I use square tube like this, it works great in a Broadbeck, works great in a Revolution. Basically, any grinder that uses a 1.5-inch tool arm, this will work fine in. Okay, so that's the steel. For the actual bars, we're using 5/8 round stock, okay? And this is a little rough, but you'll see what we're going to do. We've got a 1/2 inch ratcheting knob, okay, a female. We've got a male 3/8. We got a couple 3/8 set screws, a 1/2 inch bolt washer, and then this is a tapping bit to do these. And then these were purchased, and I'll have a link below on where to get these, and we'll do a little bit of a modification on these with the tape and these bolts. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is drill some holes. So we're going to start by drilling our holes in the risers. The long one is going to have a hole on either side to receive the 5/8 bar. Okay, so we're going to be drilling a 5/8 hole centered in the bar that's 3/4 of an inch in from each side. On the small one end is going to receive the bar. Okay, so it's going to, again, middle 3/4 in. The other end is going to be 3/4 in, but it's going to be a 1/2 inch hole to receive the end of this that's going to come out of the tool arm. Okay, we've got our 5/8 holes drilled in here and a 1/2 inch here. Now, what we need to do is have set screws that keep this bar from moving. So what we're going to do is drill some 5/16 holes opposite this. They're actually going to go all the way through. And then we're going to tap them with 3/8. So the reason I'm doing 5/16 is I'm going to send it through with this bit, which is a 3/8 tapping bit. All right, so we got our holes, we've got our set screws, our tapped holes for our set screws. The next step is going to be totally optional. I like to do it just because it looks a little nicer. I have this little jig set up that just slides over this, and then I'm just going to round the edges of this on the grinder just to put a nice little curve on them. All right, we're done with our tool arm and our two leaf arms. So let's move those aside, turn our attention to this 5/8 round stock. So these typically come pretty rough. So what I'm going to do is spin this on the lathe with an old used 120 belt, just to make this finish quite a bit better. Plus, it'll make it so that they actually fit in the 5/8 holes.
You'll notice I'm doing this at the end of my lathe, just so I don't get all this grit all over my ways.
Okay, we got everything drilled and tapped and sanded smooth. Now we're ready for assembly. We're going to take our tool arm, okay, with the hole in the front, take our 1/2 inch bolt with a washer, put that through. Then we're going to take our small arm with the 1/2 inch hole, put that through. Then our handle with the 1/2 inch female, okay, and we'll leave it a little loose. Then we're going to take our small 5/8 rod, put that in here. If it doesn't fit, take like a dead blow hammer, something like that. There we go. Then this is where we're going to use our 3/8 male handle here, and you can shorten this, like grind it off. You don't really need it to be that long, but for now we'll just leave it. Okay, then the large arm, okay, and then lastly we'll put the other part. Okay, so we need a set screw on each of these, and I typically like to put these at the back so you don't actually run into them or catch on them. Okay, we've got it together. Let's put it in the grinder and see how it works. Okay, let's try this out. We will put the tooling arm into the slot. So now we've got this pivot, okay, this pivot, okay, usually you want this kind of like this, okay, and then we can lock these down. This will let us move the arm in and out. If we don't have enough travel on the arm, you can always lower it like this. All right, tighten everything up. Now, I see one issue here, and maybe it was when I did the measurements, but you want this bar centered on the belt. So there's just as much hanging over this side as there is this side. So what I'm going to do is shorten. I'm just going to move this in. There. I will probably cut that off for this one, but that is where you want it. This will let you sharpen a knife whose blade is as long as this bar. If you just switch these bars with really long ones, I have sharpened a sword on this before. You just make this bar 36 inches and you can sharpen a sword. And obviously this one has to be half as long as well. All right, let's go back to the table, talk about the holding mechanism, some changes there, and then we'll sharpen a knife. So let's talk about how you're going to hold your knife. I recommend you just go and buy the Win holding system. This whole set is $44. It comes with these two. It also comes with these guys, which quite honestly, I end up throwing out because I never use these. I'm not even sure what you would maybe use them for something else, but you'll have them. What you're really interested in is these two. So they are obvious holders. They have these thumb knobs, which we're going to get rid of. And they have springs. So you put your knife in, you tighten the top one, and then you tighten the back one, and it presses this tight. It also has these features on the handles where these are actually threaded, so you can move the handles in and out. That is completely pointless with the setup we have. So what I end up doing is either just tightening this and never moving it, which is just fine, or take a smaller set screw and just set that in permanently, because you don't care how long this is. Maybe it's okay for small adjustments, but those are just as easy to make on the grinder. Couple of changes I would recommend you make to this. First thing is, take these thumb screws out and throw them away, because they certainly did not account for these things hitting the machine when you are grinding. So they're too high that you don't give you enough relief to do something like a 20-25 degree angle. Make sure you don't lose these little springs. The other thing I do is go to the grinder and grind away these little nubs here. You don't need them, and I would grind all of this smooth here so that on both sides there's no little edges or anything like that, because those could dig into your knife. We're going to do another step to prevent that as well, and do that on both of these. Okay, I've just ground these nice and smooth. Next thing we're going to do is, well, replace the little springs here. Okay, and next we're going to take some of this, it's like basically foam tape. And I got the 1-inch kind, and this is 1/16 inch thick. I'm going to cut this down the center and put a strip here and here on both of those. This will protect your knife, and you won't have to do anything crazy and worry about scratching it every time you sharpen something. And this is rubber, actually. It's not foam, it's rubber. So I'll just measure it, give it a little cut. Okay, we have all our rubber in place. Next thing, we're going to take these, just gently put them together. Okay, then we're going to take two of these. These are M6 bolts, so if you're using the Wen system, these are metric, so these are M6, 1-inch, 20 millimeters, hex socket heads. Okay, socket caps. So you're going to just lightly put these in, and this one is threaded. All right. So now we've got a little test knife. We're going to put it like this. Usually I like to put it so that this is in the middle of the blade, unless there's some weird curve, but I'll put it there and tighten the top one first. All right, it's already pretty strong, but now once we put this one in, it is rock solid here. It is not going anywhere. Can be a little bit tighter, but there. Okay, let's go sharpen it. If you guys need belts for sharpening your knives on your 2x72, check out Maritime Knife Supply. They got everything you need. In addition to belts, everything knife making related, go check them out. Okay, we're almost ready to sharpen. I've got this rigged in here. It is just rock solid, so it's not going anywhere. I know it's probably not correct distance here. So one thing I want to do is check the angle. So I'm going to just put this angle finder here. Okay, let it stop, and I'm going to zero it. Okay. Okay, so it's at 0. Now, next thing is, what is the angle? So if I put this here, our angle right now is at 27. So now we're ready to sharpen. We've got our right angle. When we switch to this side, it's going to be the same. Okay, let's talk about belts and belt progression. I always start with a brand new blade that's never been sharpened. I start at a 120, usually a fresh 120. When I go to sharpen a few knives, I'll put a fresh 120 on. That's what I'll set my bevel. So I will do this until I see the burr. And you're going to see it when I do it. After this, I will take this off, and I usually like to do all of my sharpening with engineered belts. Okay, this is a Gator belt. This one is a 400, so I'll usually go from 120 right to a 400. I happen to have these Norax belts. One is a 600 and one is a 1200. So I'll go 4, 6, 12. After that, I'm going to move to a 2x72 leather belt with buffing compound. This one's kind of old. I'll probably have to scrape that off and redo it, but I'll use white compound, and that will take our burr off and make it nice and polished. One mention on belt speed. You can use a misting system for this. That will let you take the belt a little bit quicker. I'll usually take the belt to about 15% on my VFD. Okay, and it's different on every system, but basically if you're throwing sparks, you're going too fast, you're really burning the edge, unless you're using a misting system. So I'm going to run this really slow, probably between 10 and 15, take my time so I don't burn the edge, and get this sharpened.
Like I mentioned, putting in the initial bevel takes the longest. I probably did 10 passes on each side with the 120. I usually go down and back on each side and then flip it. Just make sure you're doing them an even number of times. Here I've zoomed in close so you can see the burr form. Look at that left side of the belt. You see it gets kind of shiny as the blade goes across. That's that burr getting formed. Now I move on to the 400 Gator belt, which always seems to sound like a spaceship. Don't ask me why. After the 120 grit, All of these other belts, I only end up doing 2 passes on each side. That's plenty.
And now it's time to switch to the Norax belts.
Okay, now I've got the leather belt on and I'm ready to strap it. For this, you really want to change the angle ever so slightly, but instead of doing that, what I do is usually just bring the blade up. I'm just pushing it up with my thumb about a 1/4 inch.
Now you're doing the opposite and you should see that burr start to disappear.
All right, my favorite sharpening test is the good old U-line book, because this paper is super thin. So if it can cut through this, it can pretty much cut through anything. Oh yeah, look at that. And paper's always a good test to run from edge to edge, just to make sure you got no burrs. Okay, that one's a little thin, but let's try a new one. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. You could take it to a higher grit if you wanted to, but 1200 gives you a really fine edge. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but the edge is perfectly shiny all the way down. You know, there's no stops, starts, there's no little imperfections on the edge. It is nice and beautiful and shiny. And you can see this is it was pretty thick at the edge here. This is kind of like a bushcraft knife, so it's got a pretty wide secondary bevel on it. I call this one a success.
So there it is, folks, all finished, proven. Knife is super sharp. This sharpening system is really easy to put together. You got to find all the parts, source all the steel and things like that. If you don't want to go through all that, you can just buy them from my website, TyrellKnifeWorks.com. You'll see it up in the corner. I'll give you everything from the rubber tape to the little screws that go in your Wen attachment. All you got to buy is the 2x72 sharpening attachment from me and the holders from Wen or wherever else you want to get them from. I'll be releasing, the pre-orders will be a bit cheaper. We'll see how they go, but I'm trying to keep these under $200. Thanks, folks. Check these out. I'll see you on the next one.